So let's set you up with a workspace in Adobe Illustrator. First of all, you're going to open Adobe Illustrator. If you haven't already put it in your dock, you may have to find it. In order to do that, go to your applications and under Adobe Illustrator, there we go, there's the icon. If you want to put it in your dock, now's the time to drag it down and put it there. Once you have it open, you will see something like this, only without all these examples. These are the things that were opened most recently in Illustrator. This will be handy for you when you're trying to find your work later. This only works if you don't move your file after you make it. So perhaps start your files in the folder you'd like to store them in. First thing you're going to do is hit Create New, and this will bring up this dialog box. The dialog box has a bunch of different options. These are the ones I've used most recently, so I have things already here. You won't have recent yet because this is the first time you've opened it. You're going to make a print file. When you click on print, there are some standard sizes that come up. You're not actually using any of those. If you go to View All Presets, there are a couple of other options. These aren't the right size either. However, they will be useful in the future when you might want to do something on a letter-sized piece of material, an A4 sheet of paper, etc. What we're going to do is create our own preset so that the width is going to be 24 inches. Now, first of all, change your units first, inches, then go into width and put 24. Then go down to height and put 18. This board is now the same size as the laser bed. Now, this is much larger than a piece of paper, so as you are working, you will need to remember that it's a large area that you're working on. And double check with your rulers how big the object is that you're actually creating. Then hit Create. Once you hit the Create button, your document will open. Your document will default to a couple of different, toolbars. And I am going to want to move this over so you can see all of these toolbars. There we go. In order to zoom in or zoom out, you can use some typical key commands like Command plus will zoom in, Command minus will zoom out. That is my 24 inches by 18 inches piece of material. It is called an artboard. Your artboard is the area in which you're going to do your creating. One of the things that I have automatically pop up is my layers. You're going to want to pay attention to your layers as you're working. You're going to want your things to cut in one layer or more, and your things to engrave in a separate layer or layers from the things you're going to cut. Bear that in mind. The layers can be located here. If you hover over any of these, you will see what they are, but this is your layers right here. Okay, the other key thing for your setup is under Illustrator Preferences, you want to set your units. Again, I set units in inches, but you are going to actually work in millimeters. So when you create your document, have it come up in the 24 by 18 inches, but then either work in millimeters or centimeters, depending on how your brain works. Given that we are generally working in millimeters for tolerance fit for some of the things we will be cutting, you probably want to set your units to millimeters. You also are going to want your stroke either on millimeters. Yeah, definitely millimeters. Don't have it on anything else. Forget choices, put it on millimeters. Type you want in points. That's your 12 size font, 14 size font. Those are points. That's 12 points, 14 points, etc. So leave your type in points, but make your stroke in millimeters. The rest of this stuff is pretty much good to go. Okay. Now, the other thing that we'll want to bring up before you start working are your rulers. There are a couple ways to do that. You can do View, Rulers, Show Rulers. Or, you will notice, View, Rulers, Show Rulers, you have Command R, which will turn it on and turn it off as you want it to be on or off. So There's them off, and Command R brings them back up again. Now, your rulers are here, 50 millimeters, 100 millimeters. There we go. Right? As you zoom in, your rulers become that much more important because you can start to see there's 5 millimeters, 10 millimeters, however big the thing is that I'm making. Okay? Or 150, 500, et cetera, et cetera. So, rulers, units, size of your artboard, the fact that it is a white background is fine. You're going to generally work that way. Realize that your fill over here, this is fill, by the way, you may want to have your fill on a slightly off-white, like a light gray, so that if you accidentally have it on, because generally you're going to want it off, and you make a shape, that you can see that you have your fill on. You can see how, for example, if I put this back to white, this has fill in it, but you don't visually register that because it's the same color as the background. So my suggestion would be make your fill at the very least a pale gray so that you can see if it's on or off, and you can do that intentionally and not accidentally have fill that's just white like the background. Your stroke here is on black. That's also fine. As you are working, oops, cancel. As you are working, you might decide that, there we go, that you want your stroke to be a little bit larger so you can see it. Right now it is at 0.353 millimeters. If we have this selected and we want to change that stroke size, it could be selected. There we go. You can change that stroke size to 1 millimeter. Makes it a little bit bigger, easier to see. Later, as we're working, and this will be in the next screencast, you will have a very thin line to cut. But in order to see what you're doing, it needs to be larger than that to begin with. So somewhere in this ballpark is fine. Again, needs to be selected or it won't change it. Okay, great. Let's walk through the toolbar over here while we're here for your setup. You have the selection tool. I can select the whole thing, move it around, no problem. The direct selection tool allows you to select just an anchor point. Watch this. Whoa, I can move just one point around. Whee! Command Z. Or just a path. We can select a whole path and move a whole path around. Well, that's fun. Yeah, so that's the difference between the selection tool, whole thing, direct selection tool, one or more points, right? So we could decide we're going to select those two, and maybe we want this third one too. Shift here. Look, 1 point stays fixed and the other ones are moving around. Oh joy, right? All kinds of options. The escape key will let you undo things. When you switch tools, switch them over here in your toolbar, or any of these drop downs have access to some of these things as well. There's all kinds of things going on here. If you see the triangle here, options, triangle here, note the triangle in the corner. Oh, it doesn't want to play that game. Fine. Eyedropper tool. There we go. There are all kinds of options that you have for these tools, and it's under anything with that little triangle in the corner. Setup, rulers, tools, selection tool. You've got a magic wand tool that you can select some things. Magic wand tool, you could select the object. The lasso tool, if you're trying to select things that are next to each other, you might want to use the lasso tool. Another viable selection tool. Don't see it. Okay, if you are using your selection tool or the direct selection tool, you can click and drag the square around what it is you want to select, and it will select it. That's another option. Later, we'll figure out how to use the Bezier pen tool. Type is just what you think it is. It's text. It has options. And every time you click on another tool, you will see that the tools up top will change, right? So if we click on text, we have some text information. We have paragraph, we have character, all kinds of options. If you want to change the color, there are color options. Some of these things will pop out automatically. You want to change the fill and the stroke. We have those options up here, width, etc. Eraser tool. Pretty much if you hover over it, you can see it. What we're going to use in the next screencast, or frequently actually in this class, is the shape tool, which apparently doesn't want to select right now. Left click. There we go. Left click on the triangle, and here are the other options. Shapes, rectangle, rounded, ellipse, polygon, star tool, flare tool. Ignore these. Well, star tool you might need for something, but flare tool, ignore that. It adds like lens flare. Very cool. Not what you need in this class. But these other ones are really awesome, and they let you, let's say I wanted to do a few of these things. Cool. Let's say I wanted to cut this out. Let's do that. So you can see on all of those outlines, it would cut all of the outlines, right? So you'd end up with 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 pieces. I don't want 11 pieces. I want one piece that has this weird outline around the gray parts and a hole in the middle. How do I do that? This shape builder, if you have the pieces selected first, you can drag from one to the next and it will join these shapes together. Look, no more dividing areas. This is all one shape with one outline. Very cool stuff. So your shape tool and your shape builder are going to be your friend, particularly as you construct this phone stand or Kumon or whatever the first piece is that you're going to be doing. So that's the basics. You don't need a perspective grid. Mesh tool we'll deal with later. Don't need gradient right now. Don't need blend tool yet. The rest of this is pretty much what you think it is. Feel free to experiment and like hover over. What is this tool? Huh. Shaper tool. Huh. Eraser tool. What does it do? Your paintbrush, don't use your paintbrush to make an outline, because when it makes an outline here, it actually creates the fill and the stroke together. So if we zoom in here, right, there's too much information. You don't want to be doing that. So for now, stay away from the paintbrush tool. Yeah, so that is pretty much, oh, let me do one more thing. The Bezier pen tool, which I'll have a more full explanation of the Bezier pen tool, works similarly to the direct selection tool. When you select a point, an anchor point, right? Anchor. And this is pretty cool because you've got like anchor, handle, path. Do I have a node here somewhere? No, handle. It will tell you what you're hovering over. And you need to make sure that if you want to change the path itself, you can do that. It's not very accurate. But if you want to change the curve, oops, go back up here. Change the handle. Anchor, where's my anchor? There's my anchor point. I can select a handle, and now it turns at the point of the anchor point. I can select the anchor point and move the anchor point while the curve stays relative to that anchor point. Your handle changes the curve and the direction of the curve and the severity of the curve. The longer it is, the more severe that curve. The more gentle, the shorter it is, the more gentle the curve, to the point where if you bring it in to the anchor point, you get another corner, right? So you can have something that's corner to curve because one of the handles or two of the handles on that part of the path are located on the anchor point, right? So things to think about. Let me zoom back out. And that's probably enough for screencast number 1. Start with that.